The U.S. Federal Reserve has frozen interest rates for the third consecutive time amid deep internal divisions over rising oil prices and economic uncertainty, as Chair Jerome Powell prepares to conclude his term. As ceasefire talks remain deadlocked, the U.S. is preparing for a prolonged naval blockade of Iran while organizing a new international coalition to restore shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, despite Tehran's warnings of inevitable retaliation. South Korea saw rare triple growth across the output, consumption and investment sectors this March, but experts warn that higher oil prices and the U.S.'s escalating conflict with Iran threaten to stall this newfound economic momentum. We start in the U.S., where the Federal Reserve has decided to leave its benchmark interest rate unchanged for the third session in a row. Our Kim Jun-ong covers this latest decision, which comes ahead of a leadership transition that pundits here believe render uncertain future U.S. monetary policy.
The U.S. Federal Reserve left interest rates unchanged at 3.5 to 3.75% on Wednesday, in what is likely to be Jerome Powell's final meeting as Fed chair. The decision was announced after a divided FOMC regular meeting and marks the third consecutive rate freeze this year. Explaining the move, the central bank pointed to mounting inflation pressure from rising global oil prices tied to the Middle East conflict, as well as growing economic uncertainty.
The U.S. economy has been expanding at a solid pace. While job gains have remained low, the unemployment rate has been little changed in recent months. Inflation has moved up and is elevated, in part reflecting the recent increase in global energy prices.
The decision was the most divided since 1992, with 4 of the 12-member committee dissenting, including 3 who took issue with language in the post-meeting statement that suggested the central bank could eventually resume rate cuts. The Fed said it remains committed to achieving its 2% inflation goal over time, adding it is prepared to adjust policy if risks threaten the path, a signal some analysts say leaves the door open to rate cuts. The meeting was also likely the final FOMC session under Jerome Powell. However, at a press conference on the same day, he said he plans to stay at the central bank as a member of its board of governors.
After my term as chair ends on May 15, I will continue to serve as a governor for a period of time to be determined. I plan to keep a low profile as a governor.
The June FOMC meeting is expected to be chaired by nominee Kevin Warsh. The Senate Banking Committee on Wednesday advanced Warsh's nomination to the full Senate, and if confirmed, he is expected to assume the role after Powell's term as chair ends. Meanwhile, Korea's central bank said the Fed's split decision has added to uncertainty over the future path of U.S. monetary policy, particularly ahead of the next chair's inauguration. Earlier Thursday, the Bank of Korea pointed to deeper divisions within the FOMC and rising inflation pressure from higher oil prices. The central bank added it will stay alert, monitor risks including the situation in the Middle East closely, and act as needed. Kim Jun-ong, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. are not discussing a reduction or withdrawal of U.S. forces stationed in Korea. That's according to senior Blue House spokesperson Kang Yoo-jung on Thursday, when asked about U.S. President Donald Trump's social media post indicating a possible reduction of American troops in Germany. Kang said that the government is paying attention to a possible change in U.S. combat posture around the world. She added that Seoul is closely coordinating with the U.S. forces for the stable stationing of its troops and the allies' robust joint defense readiness. There are currently around 28,500 American troops in South Korea. U.S. President Donald Trump has reaffirmed intentions to extend America's naval blockade of Iran's seaports, and Iran has vowed to retaliate. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has the details.
Following the collapse of the second round of ceasefire talks, signs suggesting a prolonged deadlock continue to emerge. According to foreign media reports, the two sides appear to be preparing for a prolonged standoff, having failed to find common ground on key issues such as lifting the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and addressing Iran's nuclear program. In a phone interview with Axios, Trump reportedly said he was going to keep Iran under a naval blockade until the regime agrees to a deal that addresses U.S. concerns about its nuclear program. The Wall Street Journal also reported that Trump has instructed his aides to prepare for an extended blockade of Iran, aimed at forcing Iran to abandon its nuclear ambitions. Iran, however, is insisting that reopening the Strait of Hormuz and ending the war should be addressed first. According to Iran's state-run TV, a senior Iranian security official said that the Iranian military has reached the limit of its patience with the maritime blockade, and if the U.S. continues its illegal blockade around the Strait of Hormuz, retaliation will be inevitable. Meanwhile, the U.S. has pitched a new international coalition to restore shipping through the strait, according to the Wall Street Journal. Citing an internal State Department cable sent to U.S. embassies, the report said that Washington has asked its diplomats to press foreign governments into joining a new alliance called the Maritime Freedom Construct, which would coordinate information sharing, diplomatic efforts, and sanctions enforcement to reopen the strait. The MFC would be led by the State Department, serving as the hub for diplomatic operations, while the U.S. Central Command provides real-time maritime intelligence to facilitate information sharing between commercial shipping and allied militaries. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Korea's special diplomatic envoy to Iran has returned to Seoul after having strengthened bilateral communication channels with senior government officials in Tehran this month. This is expected to serve as a useful tool to coordinate on the safety of Korean nationals and ships. Our Uchi Zoo reports.
Seoul has reinforced vital dialogue channels with Tehran through the recent visit of a special envoy to Iran. That's according to one foreign ministry official in Seoul speaking with reporters Thursday. The official revealed that Ambassador Chung Byung-ah returned to Seoul on Monday after 2 weeks of diplomatic outreach in Tehran on behalf of Foreign Minister Cho Hyun. The visit was made in a rare high-level diplomatic push as tension in the Middle East continued to disrupt global shipping routes. Meeting with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi last week, the envoy called for Iran's continued cooperation in ensuring the safety of around 40 South Korean nationals in the country, as well as embassy staff. He also urged Tehran to guarantee the free and safe passage of all vessels, with 26 Korean ships currently in regional waters. Chung also highlighted the long-standing ties between Seoul and Tehran, noting that South Korean diplomatic missions and companies remained in Iran even during the country's war with Iraq in the 1980s. The envoy also met with other senior officials in the Iranian government. Tehran described the visit as the first by a senior foreign official since the outbreak of the conflict and acknowledged Korea's decision to maintain its embassy in the country despite wartime conditions. Minister Cho had ordered the special envoy's mission just 1 day after the US-Iran ceasefire was announced in early April. Cho proposed sending the envoy during a phone call with his Iranian counterpart, which was met with a positive response. Envoy Chung departed Seoul within 16 hours of that call, traveling via Istanbul and Turkmenistan before crossing into Iran by land. However, a series of unexpected variables unfolded during the envoy's visit. US-Iran talks had stalled, while the Strait of Hormuz faced intermittent closures amid escalating tensions. Still in Seoul's assessment, the mission marks a significant step amid an ongoing conflict and limited means of communication. The Korean envoy was able to directly engage with Iran's highest accessible diplomatic leadership, helping reinforce dialogue channels with Tehran, with further coordination expected depending on how the situation evolves. The official indicated that while Seoul continues to support multilateral efforts to stabilize the Strait of Hormuz, it is also pursuing direct bilateral engagement to secure tangible outcomes on the ground. Uchi Zoo, Arirang News.
Seoul and Canberra will work together to secure energy resource supply chains, including diesel, liquid fuels, and liquefied natural gas. The two governments released a joint statement on energy cooperation on Thursday as Foreign Minister Cho Hyun met with his Australian counterpart Penny Wong in Seoul. The joint document says the two sides are working together to strengthen energy resource supply chain resilience, including through deepening regional cooperation and accelerating energy transition. The two countries shared deep concern over the recent situation in the Middle East and its ripple effects on regional energy resources and other key raw materials. Geopolitical tensions in the Middle East are once again highlighting South Korea's vulnerability to global oil shocks. One potential alternative gaining traction is hydrogen. While much of today's hydrogen is derived from imported LNG in South Korea, it offers a strategic shift towards a self-sustaining future. For more on this, our business and economics correspondent Kim Do-yeon joins us in the studio to discuss more about this energy vulnerability. Welcome, Do-yeon.
Thanks for having me.
So, Do-yeon, you've spent the past week diving deep into the hydrogen sector. Based on what you found, do you think this is a realistic path towards energy independence for South Korea?
Well, that's right. First, with over 70% of our crude oil coming from the Middle East, finding an alternative isn't just about the environment. It's an economic imperative. I visited the capital region's largest hydrogen plant to see how this transition is stabilizing local energy costs and where it still falls short. First, take a look. A heavy-duty truck carrying bright orange tube trailers pulls into a facility. Its cargo is hydrogen. This is the largest hydrogen production plant in the capital region, located in Pyeongtaek. By extracting hydrogen from natural gas, the facility produces up to 7 tons daily, enough to charge over 8,000 cars. Amid rising geopolitical tensions, Korea's energy vulnerability is intensifying. The country relies on the Middle East for over 70% of its crude oil. However, only 20% of its natural gas comes from the region. While global gas prices fluctuate, they are currently trending downward, offering a crucial buffer against oil shocks.
Because the natural gas supply chain is highly diversified compared to oil, distribution is much more stable.
The retail price of hydrogen has remained stable at around 10,000 won per kilogram. Fully charging a passenger car costs roughly 50,000 to 60,000 won. While global natural gas prices do fluctuate due to geopolitical risks, the Korean government heavily subsidizes hydrogen retail costs to shield consumers. The rationale behind absorbing this financial burden is simple: cleaner air. Extracting hydrogen from fossil fuels like LNG still creates carbon dioxide. This facility right next door addresses that flaw directly by capturing 100% of the CO2 emitted during the process and putting it into use. The captured carbon is compressed, frozen, and repurposed into dry ice, turning a greenhouse gas into usable commercial asset. The captured carbon can also be supplied to major e-commerce logistics centers and local shipyards to power welding. But operators are looking beyond secondary sales.
The ultimate goal is turning captured CO2 back into energy. Once the conversion technology is optimized, our vision is to manufacture and supply next-generation aviation fuels directly from this plant.
The reality is that natural gas is still an imported fossil fuel. Hydrogen produced this way is not complete energy independence. But by neutralizing emissions and localizing the supply chain, this infrastructure serves as an essential stepping stone toward a truly green energy future.
So, Do-yeon, as you just pointed out in your report, natural gas is still an imported fossil fuel. So can we really call this energy independence?
Right, strictly speaking, no. True energy independence will only come with what we call green hydrogen. So that is hydrogen extracted purely from water using renewable energy, thereby eliminating the need for imported LNG. But right now, that process is too expensive. So the government is using this LNG-based hydrogen as a transitional stepping stone. The goal is to preemptively build up the nation's physical infrastructure, the pipelines and charging stations, so that when water-based green hydrogen becomes economically viable, our ecosystem is already running.
Right, and speaking of that ecosystem, we're seeing a rapid expansion on the mobility front. And how do you think South Korea is positioned in the global race to, commercialize this?
Well, the nation is actually starting from a position of strength. So last year, Korea sold the most hydrogen-powered passenger cars globally. And moving forward, the government is aggressively pushing to deploy significantly more hydrogen transit buses and heavy-duty trucks on our roads. However, the global competition is intensifying. So Beijing just announced its own 5-year plan to expand hydrogen energy driven by the same exact Middle East energy anxieties that South Korea faces. While South Korea currently leads in sales and fuel cell technology, China is bringing massive state capital to the table to maintain the nation's current super gap against rivals, successfully localizing that water-based green hydrogen technology remains the most urgent task.
Right, seems to be a critical transition period for the country.
Indeed.
So thank you for your report, Toyan.
My pleasure.
For the first time in half a year, South Korea saw a simultaneous rise in production spending and investment in March. But pundits remain cautious about the months ahead amid tensions on the geopolitical front. Our economics correspondent Park Junan reports.
Korea's economy delivered a broadly positive set of triple growth numbers in March, with industrial output, consumption, and investment all rising for the first time in 6 months. According to data released on Thursday by the Ministry of Data and Statistics, overall industrial production rose 0.3% from the previous month, extending gains for a second consecutive month. Equipment investment rose 12.6% quarter-on-quarter in the first quarter of 2026. This is the largest quarterly increase since the fourth quarter of 1999, more than 26 years ago. Retail sales grew 2.4% quarter-on-quarter, the strongest surge since the second quarter of 2020. Semiconductor production, however, fell 8.1% month-on-month. While it might sound alarming, an official from the Ministry of Data and Statistics said this was due to a base effect. The official explained that the semiconductor sector saw the decline in March following a 28.2% surge the previous month, noting that its performance remains strong. The March data showed some positive numbers, but it largely reflects momentum that predates the Middle East conflict.
Overall, the March data appear to reflect a combination of factors, including the initial shock from the war, seasonal maintenance schedules, and government policies. Going forward, we need to monitor cumulative time series trends from April onward, as well as cross-industry spillover effects from the war.
With high oil prices and geopolitical uncertainty issues unresolved, Korea's economic trajectory beyond the second quarter remains difficult to predict. Park Junan, Arirang News.
As Korea prepares to mark Labor Day tomorrow, President Lee Jae-myung called for greater solidarity and responsibility in the labor sector at a meeting with his aides earlier today. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yu-jin reports.
On the eve of Labor Day in Korea, newly designated as a public holiday this year, President Lee Jae-myung has called for greater cooperation in the labor sector.
인공지능 대전환으로 노동과 산업 현장이 앞으로 근본적인 변화에 노출되게 됩니다. 이런 중차대한 도전을 이겨내려면 상생과 협력의 정신이 필요합니다.
Chairing a weekly meeting with his aides on Thursday, Lee urged businesses to treat workers as key partners. At the same time, he called on workers to strengthen solidarity with one another.
고용에 있어서 약자일 수밖에 없는 노동자들의 힘은 같은 입장을 가진 다른 노동자들과의 연대에서 나옵니다.
The president also emphasized the importance of responsibility, warning that actions taken for short-term gains could ultimately backfire and lead to greater losses.
그런데 일부 조직 노동자들이 자신들만 살겠다고 과도한 요구, 부당한 요구를 해서 우리 국민들로부터 지탄을 받게 되면 해당 노조뿐만이 아니라 다른 노동자들에게도 피해를 입히게 됩니다.
These remarks come as tens of thousands of Samsung Electronics workers are preparing to go on an 18-day strike starting May 21st, demanding higher bonus pay. Union members are calling for the removal of a cap on bonuses, currently set at 50% of base salary, and for allocating 15% of the company's annual operating profit as bonus pay. The potential walkout is raising concerns over disruptions to chip production. Now, meanwhile, President Lee is set to attend a Labor Day ceremony at the Blue House on Friday. His office says the country's two major labor unions will take part, marking the first time they've joined such an event together. 송유진, Arirang News.
International travel to South Korea is seeing a decisive return to form as visitor numbers surpassed the 2 million mark in March. Data from the Korea Tourism Organization on Thursday showed that arrivals rose by more than 26.7% on year, pushing the first quarter total to 4.74 million. Chinese tourists accounted for the largest share of those arrivals at over 500,000. BTS concerts in Gwangamun and other key major cities acted as a key draw for global fans, helping push arrival figures beyond their 2019 benchmarks. Amid renewed debate over whether or not zoos are ethical, one free public zoo in Gwangju is seeking to share a more meaningful approach. Our culture correspondent Park Gun-woo was there.
This painted stork once roamed freely at Gwangju's Uchi Zoo before suffering a serious leg fracture. But thanks to the veterinarian stationed here, it's now recovering after emergency surgery.
The surgery was successful thanks to the zoo's great medical facilities. In the past, zoos were often just places where people came to see animals, but we aim to show the full journey, from how animals arrive here to how they're cared for.
Kang says injured animals like this stork would normally have been euthanized or kept away from public view due to a shortage of vets and concerns over exhibition value, but Uchi Zoo is taking a different approach.
Among the animals here is Dukobi, a parrot getting ready for artificial beak surgery later this year. After losing her beak years ago in an accident, Dukobi found fast treatment and steady recovery here at this zoo, where injured animals like her get a second chance.
Medical training is another way the zoo provides proper care, even training animals to calmly have their blood taken without needing an anesthetic. And the entire process is open to the public.
Learning about these cases seems especially educational for children.
Beyond medical care, the zoo is also expanding behavioral enrichment programs, creating environments that encourage animals to act according to their natural instincts.
Many animals here have their own stories. We want this zoo to be a sanctuary where rescued animals can find safety and care. We also hope to connect more with visitors through enrichment programs.
Zoos like this are increasingly being recognized as a model for how zoos can evolve.
Creating experience around the animals so that people can, as we've talked about, can see them exhibiting natural behaviors and living interesting lives. And that's important as we build a bond with the public, that they know that they can trust that these animals are receiving exceptional care.
As more visitors seek out these meaningful experiences, the number of guests at Uchi Zoo during the first 3 months of this year doubled on year. And as the zoo continues helping shape an appropriate zoo culture, expectations are rising for even more visitors this year. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News, Gwangju.
Temperatures have been swinging quite a bit lately, making it tricky to dress for the day. Tomorrow, much like today, inland areas will see day-to-night temperature swings of around 15 degrees, so make sure to dress in layers. Meanwhile, rain is set to move in later today. We'll see around 5 to 10 millimeters in southern Chungcheong-do, the eastern parts of Jeollado and the Gyeongsang-do provinces. Most of the rain will clear out overnight, but in the Gyeongsang-do provinces, it may stick around into tomorrow morning. Dry conditions are still in place in some inland areas, though a few advisories could be lifted as the rain moves in. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 11 degrees Celsius, Daejeon at 10 degrees, Busan at 12 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 25 degrees, Chuncheon at 24 degrees, Daegu at 23 degrees. We'll stay warm and sunny through Saturday before rain returns nationwide on Sunday. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That's all we have for tonight. I'm Moon Hae-ryun, filling in for Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.